Hi there, Better Nature peeps. I am going to do a brief little series here on some of the biology terms that I tend to use when I'm talking about plant healthcare and landscaping in the urban environment because I think it might be useful. So, first one is, what is biodiversity? So, biodiversity, for those of you who haven't spent time studying science, is biological or living life, the diversity of it. And it's basically just a measure of how much diversity there is in a particular area. That could be the diversity in your backyard and front yard, on your ranch, in your city, in the forest that you hike, that kind of thing. So, like, for example, maybe you have you live in an urban environment where there's a high density, then maybe the only critters that come through your backyard occasionally are squirrels and rabbits, and that's because there's actually enough canopy cover or trees to provide homes for those squirrels, and there's enough shrubbery and annuals and perennial plants for the rabbits. Whereas if you live in a more rural environment, you might be lucky enough to have a bunch of things come through your yard, like occasionally a coyote or foxes, jackrabbits, rabbits, turtles. If you're in the desert sometimes, various reptiles, geckos, should be one of them, and tree frogs. You might have tree frogs and opossums and the annoying skunk, stinky skunk. So that latter example would have higher biodiversity than the first. So who cares about biodiversity? What's the big point? So another great example, and this will get us to the point, is when I was a kid, just a long time ago, driving across country, our windshield would be covered in insects at the twilight hours. And that's because we weren't using as many pesticides as a country. And so the insect biodiversity was a lot higher than it is now. You don't have those insects gunking up the windshield. Okay, so that's kind of nice. But the problem is a lot of those insects are beneficials. What it means by beneficials is they consume the insects that consume the plants we love, whether it's plants we're eating or plants we're growing, cultivars that are particularly beautiful in our landscape. All right. It turns out there's some pretty recent research, and I've only just sort of skimmed the surface of it, so I can't really explain it very well right now. Give me time. It turns out that the increased biodiversity a community is exposed to, a human community, the lower the probability of encountering disease. Now, why is that? It looks like, and maybe there's not even an answer for it yet, but it looks like if you have more mammals and reptiles and birds and plants and insects, then the microbes that cause the diseases have more types of hosts that they can infect, and they're not basically being whittled down to one human host. And so this may possibly be a reason, and like I said, take this with a grain of salt because I haven't done the background research, but this may be why there's a relationship between lower biodiversity and increased disease outbreaks in human populations. Now, the denser the human population, the higher the probability of a disease outbreak, right? So the more people you have squished into one area, the more likely that disease is going to travel. And that's what it means by an outbreak, just that it increased the number of human hosts that disease gets to live in, just due to proximity. All right. There are other things in terms of biodiversity that can improve health of a community that are more easily explained and much, much better understood. And one of those is if you have increased tree diversity, Then you have, this may seem counter to those of us that have allergies. I have terrible allergies this time of year. It's worth it for the trees, but I do have the allergies. So I feel you there. However, in areas where people have high canopy, so a lot of trees with leaves, and different types of trees, because different types of leaves will collect different particle sizes, almost like radio waves. It reduces the particulate matter that is in the air, it cleans the air, and it reduces asthma cases. Okay, so those who have asthma are healthier and have reduced hospital visits in areas where they get to live with higher tree numbers. So basically, we already know trees breathe for us, so to speak, right? They give us oxygen and they take in carbon dioxide. So we breathe oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So we're pretty much intricately connected. We already need them for oxygen, but it turns out they can do more than just supply oxygen. And the diversity counts because if you have, here we go back to humans, right? And this lower biodiversity, increased diseases in humans. It's the same for trees. If you have a low diversity of trees, biodiversity, so you just have a bunch of ash trees, for example, lining your boulevard, and an insect or disease comes through that's going to wipe them out or kill them fast, sometimes that's called virulence, then you've got a problem because you lose your mature trees rapidly. It's expensive. You just wiped out a bunch of 60-year-old trees and maybe 60 to 100 foot canopies. And now you've got to plant small trees because what city can afford to plant large trees? And that's because the lower the diversity, the more likely you are to lose what you have if it gets hit by a particular disease or insect. Also, the lower the diversity, the greater the probability there is that a disease will be able to infect those trees and do a lot of damage. That is a whole dissertation thesis to explain, so I'm not going to go there. We'll just leave it at biodiversity is important for human health and it's important for ecosystem. An ecosystem means all the living things in a particular area, including air quality and water quality, so some of the non-living things, and soil health. All of those things combined, all the living things and all the non-living things that contribute to the health of the living things, that is an ecosystem. They all work together, it's all connected. So, greater biodiversity, the greater the ecosystem health, and that feeds back in terms of human health. Alright, I hope this has been helpful. Please let me know what has not been helpful, how I should change this, if there's some segment of this you'd like me to elaborate, or some other obscure word that I've used from my many years of training in science. I don't even think about it, and I know a lot of you already know this. I just want to be engaging with people who this is not your thing, right? You are a master of accounting, which I know nothing about, or you're a master realtor or developer, again, things I know nothing about. I want to make sure that I'm talking to you and providing you useful information. All right, I hope you all are staying healthy in this craziness and taking care of each other.